Greetings, everyone. We've put this seminar together with all of those communities who have been affected by the recent devastating bushfires in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland in mind. And now they're further challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic. The aim of this seminar is to consider the mental health of children and young people in these highly stressed communities, but it will also be relevant for families who live in other stressful situations. The seminar's primarily for parents and teachers and all of those who care for children in the bushfire devastated communities and are now further challenged by the pandemic. What we're going to do in this seminar is firstly look at what are our normal responses to stress and challenge. Then we're going to look at how to recognise the emergence of mental health problems, particularly in children and adolescents in these communities, and then how to respond and help children and families and communities recover and build resilience. Firstly, we're going to consider stress in response to challenging situations. Stress is our reaction to threat and challenge, and when any of us gets stressed, it can produce arousal, anxiety and worry, and also a response in our bodies and our minds to that stress. Stress occurs when the threat or the experience is overwhelming. And certainly for many children, families and communities, the threat of the recent bushfires at times was overwhelming and beyond the ordinary coping capacity of children and adults. If we are stressed and if this stress overwhelms us, then it is normal to have a response to that involves our mind, our thinking, our emotions, that is our feelings. It involves the responses of our body, and it involves disturbed or different behaviours. For example, in everybody's response to overwhelming stress, they may experience fear and helplessness and anxiety. A child or a person can become highly agitated, or they may become forgetful and not be able to think straight. They may have some changes in their body experiences. For example, their heart may beat rapidly and they may experience palpitations. They can become disorganised when ordinarily they might be very competent and organised. They can become irritable and grumpy. Our senses can be overloaded so that we decompensate. We can begin to shake. Sometimes some people withdraw and go into a withdrawal state. We can experience feelings of overwhelming sadness or hopelessness or helplessness. We can experience feelings in our body like headaches or feeling like we want to be sick. A lot of these experiences can also be beyond words, particularly in children. It is very hard to find the words to put to overwhelming experiences. And a lot of children and also some adults might become very clingy on those that are close to them. Now, all of these responses are normal. They're part of the acute stress response. And they may last 4 weeks or 5 weeks, and that's perfectly normal. But if the person or the child lives in a community where there's an adequate response to that challenge or threat, then they will recover from these acute stress responses. Now, what can lead to recovery of the acute stress response? Well, firstly, if the child or family experience safety again, if they feel safe in the new environment they're in. if they again experienced care from community helpers, from parents, from all those that offer care and comfort. If they again can experience love and affection and closeness and support. Mutual support from communities, one with each other, is highly valuable during this acute stress response recovery. Other practical things need to be attended to. Is shelter available? Is shelter going to be available in the medium term while recovery of buildings and shelter is attended to? And most importantly, are communities receiving practical and financial help to recover? Are destroyed buildings able to be pulled down and plans made for the building of new ones? Is adequate financial help available so that families won't feel worried about where their next meal is going to come from? Families need to experience routine of daily life again, and this requires plenty of good, sensible information from all those government and other agencies that are offering help. Now, all of these responses foster coping. They also foster recovery. They encourage community connection and they build resilience. Sometimes, however, the stress responses don't go away. They can be persistent. The child may continue to suffer a range of symptoms and experiences of distress. Now, why might this be so? What can contribute to this ongoing mental health difficulty? Well, firstly, unfortunately, if the child or the family experience further stress, and that's what, for example, the pandemic challenge brings, then that can lead to persistent mental health difficulties. If there's a lack of family or community cohesion in the person's life, if there are inadequate resources, if the child or members of the family experience guilt, for example, about why did we survive and others didn't, particularly in children, if they have these unformed, terrifying memories, often visual, of the stress, but don't yet have the words to describe them. If they're living in an environment which is negative and doesn't encourage return of hope and future. For example, if the family see that there's no hope in their situation, if they're experiencing criticism from others, or if they're in an environment which continues, for example, to be abusive, if their life experience is unrewarding and the community or those surrounding are indifferent to their needs. This can all contribute to persisting mental health problems. Now, what form might these mental health problems take? Well, firstly, the person can be emotionally disturbed. For example, the child might become increasingly anxious when being separated from their family or parents. They may develop anxiety about everything, even listening to the radio news or hearing people talk about difficulties. They can become anxious and panicky. Some children can even become phobic. For example, they may suddenly develop a fear of dogs or a fear of smoke. And obviously that comes from perhaps having experienced the terror of being in a smoke-filled environment of a fire. And they can develop panic. And this is an awful experience where the heart rate goes up. There's a sense of impending doom and a sense of disaster about to happen. People can also experience depression when they lose hope, feel very sad, can't see any point in life, may cry a lot, and may become highly irritable. This depression can fluctuate or it may become increasingly worse. Some people, particularly older children like adolescents and certainly some adults, can turn to try and seek comfort in substances, particularly alcohol or sometimes other drugs. And this is a dangerous and slippery slope into further problems, but you can understand at one level why a person might want to seek help when no other help is available in something like alcohol or drugs. The person can also experience the event of terror again. We call this re-experiencing. For example, the child may have intrusive thoughts of the bushfire. Terrifying dreams can intrude into their nighttime. In children, often their play may become repetitive and have themes of the stress. For example, a child may play over and over some game which involves vehicles making siren noises or tipping water all over their toys in order to put the fire out. In other words, there can be a re-experiencing of trauma themes. Other people, when they have persistent mental health problems, can try to avoid any experience or stimuli that might remind them of the stress of the bushfire, for example. They may try and avoid thinking about things related to the fire. They may try and avoid thinking about how they're going to redecorate their new bedroom. Or they may try and avoid any conversation to do with stressful events or thoughts. They may withdraw and have a numbing of responsiveness. They may withdraw from activities, particularly activities that might remind them of the fire. For instance, some children may develop a fear of going to school because it was when they were at school that the fire struck their community. So they may try and avoid people or places that remind them of the stressful event. Many people can become quite forgetful. They may head out to do a job, like mother might ask the child to go down to the bathroom and collect the wet towels from the floor to be washed. And as they're moving there, they'll forget what they have to do. They may lose interest in their play or normal fun activities. They can become detached. And of great distress to parents is that some children can lose their affection. They may pull away from those people who would normally give comfort to them because they have no sense of future. Behaviour of children may regress. For example, some little children who are toilet trained might suddenly lose that capacity and start to soil or wet themselves again. Older children may lose skills. They may lose their ability to spell words at a level which they used to have. Finally, an example of persistent mental health problems relates to what we call increased arousal. This is where the person becomes highly sensitive to the environment and is easily distracted and aroused. This can often lead to very poor sleep and inability to fall asleep or stay asleep, increased irritability. The child has poor concentration, and of course that can impair their schoolwork. Some older children may start to feel guilty about being a survivor. Why did it happen to me? Maybe I did something wrong to cause this trouble. Children can be hypervigilant and can startle easily. For example, somebody might drop a knife off the table and it bangs on the floor and the child will jump up out of their seat and be very panicky. That is, they startle easily. They can be restless. And some young people may develop antisocial and impulsive behaviour which is uncharacteristic to them and get into trouble when normally they wouldn't. So in other words, there are a lot of persistent mental health problems that can emerge after that first phase if the person is not recovering well from the initial stress. So what can we do about this? What can parents and teachers and other carers do to help young people recover? What can we do to help build their resilience? Now, for the next little while, I'm going to talk about techniques that some professionals might use to help recovery, but which are also ordinary everyday techniques which you can build into your interactions with young people in order to help them recover. And this includes you as parents. What I'm not going to talk about are very special interventions which highly trained professionals might deliver. But in many ways, what I'm going to talk about is usually sufficient to help children recover. The first principle in recovery is that parents are the key. They are the centerpiece of their child's support and recovery. It's important for parents to let children know what is happening at a level that the child can understand. It's vital that families should meet together, maybe even more frequently than before the stress. In other words, family safety and family togetherness is your priority. It's very important for children to have clear daily routines. This gives the child a sense that life is getting back to normal. It gives the child a sense of predictability. Now, what are some of the ways that we can have clearly daily routines for children? Well, firstly, you can have a calendar if you don't already have a calendar, in which details are put down about what is going to happen today. You can meet as a family perhaps once a week or at the beginning of each day to plan the day and prepare the child for any changes that might be happening that day. For example, that you've heard that there's going to be a visit to the community from the fire brigade and that they may see a fire truck. Always try to be positive, even though your child might be disturbed and distressed. And one way of doing that is to seize any opportunity that your child does which is good behaviour. Congratulate them on this. Thank them for it. Tell them they're great. Encourage everybody in the family to try and do one kind act a day and reward them for this, even though it's a small thing. In other words, positive approaches, positive rewards, telling your kids they're okay helps in recovery. Let's move on to other things parents and teachers and other carers can do. Firstly, even though life is stressful and there's many demands on people's time in a post-bushfire recovery period, try to be available as often as you can to the children. Listen to them. That's a way of telling them that you're taking them seriously. Try to explain honestly about what's happening and respect feelings. It doesn't help if you give a rosy picture of a difficult situation, because when that doesn't come to pass, the children will experience feeling let down. It's best to be honest, but tell them that they will be supported and that you love them. Now, you may not have the answers. And another approach is, if a child asks you a question that you can't answer, is to say, look, that's really important. I actually don't know, but I will try and find out for you. Aim to have and schedule times of fun and quiet. In other words, into your daily planning, have times of fun when you're going to get together and enjoy yourselves, or enable children to have fun around play and good activities. And it's important to remember here to provide and suggest activities, not just screens. Screens have their place, but they're not an alternative to activities with other people. Another vital thing in helping children recover is to consider your own and your partner's mental health, because we all can be stressed by these difficult times, and it's very important to seek help if troubled. That's not a sign of failure. And sometimes encouraging your partner to seek mental health may be really helpful because they're feeling down as well. And this is another way of you showing that you're supportive. Consider your own and partner's mental health and seek help if troubled. What else can we do? It's important to help the child feel safe and overcome fear. Now, how can we do this? Well, firstly, have little chats with your child about what their stress reactions might be. If you can see that they're worried and easily startled, in an age-appropriate way, it might be important to let your son or daughter know that you understand they're feeling pretty scared at the moment. And of course, they've got every reason to feel so because they experienced the fire. You won't be damaging them by educating them about the variety of emotional and behavioural responses to stress. In other words, if you understand what the normal stress responses are, it's important to tell your child also about that, so that they don't think that something abnormal is happening to them and no one else understands. This helps your child feel safe and it helps them overcome their fear. It's also important, linked to that, to try and teach and encourage your child to express a range of emotions. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to feel a bit irritable, but also to learn ways of managing that. Now, there are a number of activities that we can do to encourage a child to express their emotions. For example, we can emphasise both positive and negative feelings. If we see a child being happy, we can comment on it. If we see a child being grumpy, we can say, "Oh, you're grumpy today, but we understand why you might be." If you can, try and link these emotional expressions to thoughts and to bodily experiences. Sometimes when you feel anxious and worried, you might feel a bit sick in your stomach. Now mummy understands why you're not feeling like eating your food at the moment. Explain that fear is a normal response and it can be expressed as feelings, as thoughts, and as actions. That helps the child to understand why they're responding and reacting in this new and different way. Help the child to develop coping strategies to manage memories of the fire experience. We've got to be aware that children will have lots of memories about this experience, which they may not be able to easily put into words. Now, we do know, for example, that relaxation exercises can help a child cope with these memories. Now, this is somewhat more skilled, but available usually online on the web are a number of programs which teach relaxation exercises to children. These are something that can be done as a whole family. So, for example, you might go to a website on relaxation exercises, for example, one from the University of Queensland, and do this relaxation exercise as a family. It usually involves deep breathing exercises and tensing and relaxing muscle groups. In this way, you can also replace negative with positive thoughts. For example, the child might have many negative thoughts about the fire and say that they're no good and they're a bad person. You can challenge that and try and replace that negative thought with a positive thought about what some of the child's positive attributes are. For example, you can replace a negative thought with thinking about a happy event that the family's experienced in the past. Discuss and replace comments of despair with written statements of hope. For example, the child might be saying very negative, hopeless comments, and you can write that comment down and then talking to your child say, well, let's think if we can think about something that's a bit better. Like, for example, we may have lost our house, but we will build a new one. We've lost our house is the negative statement of despair, but we will build a new one is the positive statement of hope. Another important event to do with your children is in your planning of daytime activities try and schedule at least one pleasant event during the day. Now, this can be a small thing. It could be, for example, making sure that your son or daughter has a hot bath if you know they like that, or a massage. You can every now and then serve up a favourite meal for the family. You can organise a chat online with a friend, or a walk in a safe way, exercising the appropriate social distance. In other words, try and schedule one activity during the day which the family does or the child does for fun. So, in other words, we've got to kindly help and support the young person recall and describe the stressful fire experience and their associated emotional responses. Now, this is very difficult to do because some children don't yet have the words to do this. There are a number of strategies we can use here. We can ask the child to try and imagine what happened and tell their story of the fire experience. For example, perhaps you could write the story down about what happened during the fire. Or perhaps we can play a game which shows what happens during the fire. You might be able to sing a song about it. Or you might be able to say to the child, why don't you do me a drawing of the fire and how you feel? I'm going now to give several examples of how we can use drawing to help children express their emotions and start to get a memory of the terrifying event. What we have here is a drawing of what we call mood thermometers. Now, this is a communication to me currently from a child who was really very disturbed in the bushfires and is remaining highly anxious during the period of the virus pandemic. What I do is draw a mood thermometer. On the left, there's a mood thermometer with happy at the top and sad at the bottom. And rather clumsily, I've drawn pictures of a happy face and a sad face. And I've said to this child, over the past week, where have you mostly been on this happy, sad thermometer? Now, in this case, it was a girl who said, I felt very happy when we play catch with Dad. And I said, what's the saddest you've felt? I felt really sad when we forgot our dog. And I asked, what do you mean by that? Well, we lost our dog in the fire. I said, did anything else happen in the fire? Yes, my cubby burnt down. I said to this child, where do you mostly feel most of the time on this happy, sad thermometer? And they drew a mark on the thermometer at about 40% and said that I'm sad that that's the grandmother, might get the virus. In other words, this child is able to express a whole range of emotions they're currently feeling in relation to the current situation and also in relation to the fire. The second mood thermometer one can do is a calm and worried anxious thermometer. At the top, you can see a calm person. At the bottom, a very worried and anxious child. This child, when I asked mostly where have you felt in the past week or so, did a mark, a green mark in the middle of the thermometer, and when I asked what were they worried about, she said, I'm a bit worried about the virus. When I said, what's the most worried you've felt in the last little while, she said, I can't stop hearing the fire, the noise. And I said, what about it? I can't breathe. In other words, this girl is expressing some of the panic that she felt and still experiences when thinking about the fire. When does she feel most calm? She did one right at the top of the thermometer and said, when I'm in bed with Mum and Dad and Dad goes off then to get our breakfast. In other words, a safe family time in which she feels secure. The final mood thermometer has to do with irritability. At the top of the thermometer, the child is peaceful and easy, and at the bottom, very angry and grumpy. Now, this girl really emphasised that mostly she often feels very angry and grumpy by drawing a green line to cover quite a lot of the thermometer. And she gave as an example that she mostly feels irritable because her sister won't take turns. But she particularly feels grumpy when her father gets angry with her because she's naughty. She then reflected that she's naughty, but she doesn't know why. Well, of course, we know why she's irritable, because she's still suffering from the stress of the bushfires and the added stress of the pandemic. She can't identify that yet. She says, I don't know why. Another drawing technique that is open to parents and teachers and others who care for children to use is the draw a dream technique, which I designed many years ago. On a piece of paper, you draw a picture of the bed in the corner and then a dream balloon coming from the person asleep. I say to the child, here you are in bed, fast asleep, and you're having a bad or a scary or any sort of dream. Why don't you draw me a picture of your dream? Let's have a look now at the drawing that one boy did of his experience of a bad dream, which turned out to be relating to his experience of the bushfires. This boy, we'll call him Alan. He was about 9 years of age, and he was having a lot of difficulty some months after the bushfires. He was not doing well. He had many of those symptoms that I talked about earlier. He wasn't able to talk about his bushfire experiences when asked directly, but he readily did a picture of this terrible nightmare that he had. When I asked him to tell me what was happening, he said, we were running to get into the car to escape. And I said, what's happened? And he said, it was roaring and smoky. I couldn't see. I tripped over. I hurt my arm. And you can see how his arm's bent behind him. And I said, what were you thinking at that stage? I thought I would be left behind. Now, it's interesting, in the development of post-trauma stress reactions, the person often experiences a stress which they think is going to kill them, or from which there will be no escape. And Alan was having that experience in the fire. I thought I would be left behind and be burnt up in the fire. In other words, not escape. That's even though his parents and siblings were with him. He'd lost them in the smoke and thought he was going to die. So I responded, that is a really scary feeling to have. It's good to know that you've escaped and you're safe now. Now, in fact, that boy being helped to put his traumatic experience into words was what he needed to do to recover his mental health and build his resilience. So what else can we do? We've actually been talking about ways of reinforcing the child's sense of hope and how to develop coping skills and a sense of self-efficacy. Now, there are a number of other activities that we can do with children to help them develop coping skills. For example, some children keep diaries, or on the calendar, or on a piece of paper somewhere, or in their computer. You can work with the child to make a list of the people who care for them. In other words, if you're in trouble, who in your family or in the community can help? And the child might say, well, of course, my mummy and my daddy can help, but I can also ask my teacher, or I can ask Mrs. Brown in the local supermarket because I know she likes me. It gives children a sense of security when they have a list of people who they know are on their side and watching their backs. Always seek to reward effort. If a child is asked to do a job and they try and do it, for example, pick up the dirty washing, but don't quite get it right, don't criticise them for that, but compliment them on the effort that they made, and then perhaps help them finish the job. One way of helping children to feel that they've got a sense of self-efficacy is to break down difficult tasks into achievable steps. Don't ask your young child to go down the passage, collect the towels from the bathroom floor, go to their brother's bedroom and tell them it's breakfast, and on the way back go outside and ask father to come in for breakfast as well. That might be too complicated. Just give them one thing at a time and then congratulate them that they've been able to achieve that. You can keep worksheets or diaries in which the child at the end of the day can write down what feelings they've had that day. Now they may be positive feelings, in other words, green feelings. They may be slightly anxious feelings, amber feelings, or they may be dangerous feelings like feelings of panic, red feelings. And you can then help the child to reflect on ways that they've been learning about to cope with feelings that they might try to do. For example, take a break if the task is too difficult and stressful, to practice their deep breathing exercises, to tell a parent or teacher that they're having trouble. If the child can identify that they're having troublesome feelings and can then initiate some coping skills like telling a parent or teacher, then they're well on the way to recovery. Always be positive. Emphasize the young person's qualities rather than any deficiencies, and use plenty of rewards. I know of some teachers who, of course, at the end of the day, issue children with bravery rewards or other sorts of rewards for trying their best. This builds our self-esteem and helps us to recover and builds our resilience. So, learning to understand the emotional, behavioural and physical consequences of stress, putting the traumatic experiences into words, in other words, telling the story, developing coping strategies in a safe, predictable, encouraging and caring environment builds mental health and resilience. Now, of course, it doesn't always work out like that. And the next step in building resilience in children who are not recovering, and you as a parent or as a teacher or as a community have not been able to help the child come through it yet, firstly, identify that it's still happening and seek further help. If the child and family continues to struggle, seek further help. There's nothing to be ashamed of in that. Where can you get help? Well, in your own communities, it's best to turn local to your community health centre, to your family doctor, to a local clergy, to a church or a community drop-in centre. Go somewhere and share your concern. Of course, our organisation, the Mental Health Foundation Australia, also has some resources, mental health brochures. We run support groups, and we also have a helpline. And there are certainly many other organisations out there, locally many of them, which are available to call in for help. But your community health centre and doctor will know of these. Don't hold back. There's no shame in seeking help if you think that you or your family or your children are continuing to struggle. Thank you for joining me. I'm very pleased that you were able to listen, and I hope that you've learnt some strategies from what I presented. And most importantly, If you feel at the end of my talk that you need further explanations, if you need some further help, please call us. We have the number there on the slide. We've got the helpline and there's a website. Don't carry this all by yourself.